And he said, can you talk about how to properly identify the construction on FanDuel, especially whenever it's a bigger slate? I think because of the prices, it makes it hard to identify the chalk construction for me. Neil, you are pretty sharp there. In general, I would say FanDuel can be a little trickier, I think, personally. At least I haven't played FanDuel in some time. I'm kind of all in on DraftKings. But when I used to play FanDuel heavily, it was my first site I played. Their prices for players always seemed much softer to me than DraftKings, which meant that ownership got a little bit harder to assess, and just finding the chalk got a little bit harder to assess, right? Everybody was pretty well priced. Like everyone was maybe not, it's not even an efficiency problem. It's like everyone is inefficiently priced, so all the plays are good. That's how I've always felt playing FanDuel. Where DraftKings, their pricing is extremely efficient, which means that when there is a misprice or a value, it really stands out in the slate, and the chalk gets very easily identifiable. But there are a few tools that we can use that I think can kind of help you to identify where the chalk's going to go, what the common constructions are. Also, I love that you kind of mentioned construction here too. It's such an important point when you're thinking about the way you're attacking a slate, rather than what the chalky plays are, what the chalky constructions are. So let's talk a little bit about how we can do that. I like, for baseball in particular, I like for to start with the pitcher and allow that to kind of guide my understanding of the slate from there. Mostly just because a lot of salary can be committed to pitching, and because we are stacking in baseball, it doesn't always make sense to try to handle this looking at position by position what the chalk looks like. So I like to start with pitcher, and you can do that by just simply selecting pitcher and sorting by projected ownership and getting an idea of what the slate looks like, right? So this actually looks a little bit different than it did. I see we updated our projections here. It looks a little bit different than what it did before when I was preparing for this. But you can see how it's kind of unfolding now. We think that NOLA is kind of by far going to be the chalkiest. And again, FanDuel is a one-pitcher site, right? So most people are going to pay up and get to NOLA. We have a more affordable option here in Musgrove. That's probably going to be the next most popular. And then maybe like a little bit of a trickle of people still paying for that top-end pitcher here. But pivoting off of NOLA to either like Garcia or Bassett, right? And it seems like, at least for FanDuel, those are going to be kind of the construction. So it's a pay up for pitcher night where a lot of the ownership is concentrated at the high dollar pitchers with a like single relief pitcher option, right? So again, FanDuel's pricing is kind of inefficient a lot of times. So what I would typically say here, especially for something maybe like DraftKings, is that expensive pitchers implies cheaper stacks. But sometimes you can just get the cheaper stacks, or sometimes you can just get almost whatever stacks you want on FanDuel, even if you're paying up for pitcher, just because it's that easy, right? So from there, we have an idea of kind of what the constructions, I think, theoretically look like, right? People are probably either paying up for NOLA and going a little bit cheaper at their hitters, or they're going down to Musgrove to gain a little bit more access to maybe some expensive bats, or they're taking a pivot. They're paying the high dollar pitcher, but they're taking a pivot off of NOLA, right? That's really what we're seeing is the popular constructions. Those are probably going to be the chalky constructions. One thing you can actually do, and this is also stealing a little bit of thunder from, unfortunately, tomorrow's strategy session, but we can actually use the builder as a tool to see what certain chalky constructions look like. And how I would recommend doing that is literally setting your builder to what a cash game build would look like, right? Cash game would be 0-0-0, no concerns about ownership, full on chalky builds, but then setting a stack rule for yourself that says you have to build 4 stacks. And we can see, we'll even maybe let this build 100 of these. We can get an idea of what is the chalkiest construction going to look like, right? Smart diversity is all the way at 0. We're not going to get a lot of variety here. We're basically going to see like, what is the easiest chalky construction to create on the slate tonight. And let's give this a moment to run. I'm building 100 because I just want to see a few more lineups, so it will take a moment. But this can actually be a very valuable tool here, setting a build like this and running it after you've done a little bit of initial analysis to get an idea and actually have the builder try to build lineups in a way that is going to, one, mimic how typical optimizer are going to do it, right? We have all the build settings to the far left. We're going to be building basically mean projected optimal lineups with a stacking rule built in. It's going to be very similar to what a typical optimizer might do. And we can take a look and see what actual constructions look like, right? It's hard to look at all the salaries and the players and even the projected ownership and get an idea of how lineups get constructed, but we can do that very, very quickly. If Max is watching along, he's going to be so upset. I'm stealing his thunder a little bit. This is his idea. I got this from Max. We'll talk about this a lot more tomorrow too. These are kinds of the things that we wanted to talk about in our strategy session tomorrow. So if you're enjoying this, if this is useful to you, definitely tune in tomorrow because we've got a lot more of this, including what I was talking about before with. I can't remember. I mentioned stealing something from tomorrow earlier too. I can't remember what it is now, but all right. We don't need that many lineups here. That's plenty. Let's go ahead and look. So you can see, right? We're not getting a very diverse pool, right? But the builder is going to imply that Aaron Nola is probably going to be very chalky, right? It's going to be the most popular construction. And the stacks that people are getting to are primarily going to be San Diego, which unsurprisingly looks to me a little too affordable. But I mean, we see we're getting Pham at 3,000, Trent Grisham at 3,100, Will Myers at 2,500, Tatis at 46, right? This is kind of what I mean. So it's almost all San Diego chalks. This is kind of what I mean when I say that FanDuel has inefficient pricing, right? Is it's very easy to get the most expensive pitcher with the highest upside on the slate, put in a hugely productive team, and build lineups from there. So that's another great way. Like I would say now we have an idea of probably what the chalk construction is going to end up looking like. It's probably Nola with a Padre stack is probably the chalkiest build. So the last thing I'll talk about, and this is a little bit distanced from construction and more on just teams, is to take a look at Vegas too. It's always a good idea. The one thing I would want to make sure on is we were obviously building projections there with SaberSim's projections, right? Which don't use Vegas odds and sometimes can be different from Vegas. It can be a good idea to just double check here and make sure that you are on the same page, right? I would say two things that I would want to check here is to make sure that the Marlins have a very low implied total if we're thinking that Nola is going to be that owned. And they do. They're 3-4. The Tigers are also 3-4, but that game's not on the slate. I think it's probably pretty realistic. And then along with like a guy like Luis Garcia or Bassett, right? I think we're assessing the chalk probably well there. Nola's probably going to be very highly owned. The one thing that maybe hops out to me here, looking at the other games on the slate, is that we do have the Padres at 5.8 runs. It probably stands to reason that they are going to be chalky. But there are teams that we have higher than that. The Astros, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays. So it's definitely possible that maybe some of those other teams end up being a little bit more chalky there, but I think we've done a good job to overall get an idea of what the chalk constructions are going to look like, right? I mean, there's realistically the 4 pitching options that are going to soak up a ton of the ownership. People are going to run that back with a big 4 stack of Toronto, San Diego, Houston, or Red Sox, right? So, and now we have an idea of maybe how to attack that. So